Hello. Welcome and welcome back to No Borders, No Filter podcast. I'm Debra, the Experienced Explorer. We'll be talking about embracing discomfort, why pushing past the disruptive feels so right. Pain and discomfort are a part of a well lived life. Practicing opening yourself to the experience, and you may discover a greater freedom. That's from a site called mindful.org. I do believe the journey that I have chosen with living a global lifestyle has many discomforts, but I have had much more freedom in my life than if I just stayed in my home country in the US, in New York, and lived the life, as I mentioned, expected, being part of the norm of society, especially the ways that were taught to me in Long Island, New York. Why do we happily stay in it, even if we know it is not the best place for us? And there are reasons why this is the majority of people try to live in an anxiety neutral condition, meaning they limit the amount of risks, the amount of things that would contribute to an enhanced anxiety experience. Are you someone who has just followed the path that has been given to you, where you're told this is a job you're going to do, or you can study these three choices, or you can be maybe single for a short period of time, but you definitely have to get married by 25 or at latest 30? Basically, these guidelines have been presented to us in some way, shape, or form from various people and influences that create that anxiety neutral way of life. I remember going back home maybe over 10 years ago or so, and I went to a social event in my mother's retirement community, and I was talking to someone's granddaughter from my culture. And the question that I basically asked was something like, what are your plans? And she just basically did a checklist saying, I'm going to be doing this, and then I'm going to graduate, and then I'll plan to get married. Like, she had her whole life planned for herself. And I was like standing there, kind of, that doesn't sound like a life well lived. And I kind of asked her something like, do you have any plans to maybe take a year off to go travel? Or what if this doesn't work out? Do you have other ideas? Any room for taking a risk? Is there any room for another way of living? Unfortunately, even the people that have the privilege, like myself, to take themselves out of a comfort zone and put themselves in a situation that may offer something greater, something more interesting, memorable. It's just not the norm of thinking. So for me, I am always in a discomfort because I do choose to live a life where I believe discomfort leads me to more happiness, or better word, joy. Happiness is very much about an outer experience, and joy is more about the inner experience, which brings more reward to your life. And I learned a lot about that on TED Talks. And just want to side note that I do put in TED Talks in my descriptions on my YouTube channel to support topics and things that related to the episode or to the brand of my podcast. Being an HSP, INFJ, a left handed person who is a solo woman with no kids and not married, when you are put in that box, then everyday life has many discomforts because the world is made for adults that are married or have kids, right handed equipment, driving a car, the dominant patriarchal views and way of leadership. I can go on about the things that make me feel uncomfortable, but my norm is different than the norm. And I'm a person that will be challenging others to question how they would live. So sometimes I really doubt my journey. I don't feel confident, and which happens a lot. I'm going to talk about my norm with mental health and having anxiety. I have been diagnosed for over 2.5 decades. The amount of discomfort I feel in my own skin can be beyond unbearable. And part of that discomfort is because my disease is in my head. You can't see it like a broken leg or when people go through chemotherapy if they have cancer. That mental health challenges can be very lonely. And more so, it is misunderstood by most people. Certainly, I do come across even people within my own culture that they don't believe in mental illness, which I don't understand. Our brain is an organ just like any other, and it gets diseases just like any other. But when it comes to my mental health challenges, I am constantly a person that can be in worry and fear. When I went to university, I started noticing my mental health and that I was angry, but also I started being much more reclusive. I would isolate more, pushing people away, even people that were caring. I would have these behaviors that were really intrusive to my day to day life and my studies and relationships with others. I always thought that my social anxieties were just normal. Again, being a Gen X person, we didn't openly talk about mental health. And I realized towards the end of my degree that people were talking to me about, what are you going to be doing after university? And I had no clue because I was so involved in my studies and my projects and my art and everything. I just was like, I don't know. And then I started to freak out because I didn't know what to do next. I've lived a life of education and structure. Life is easier because someone else is doing everything for you, telling you where to go, when to go, how to do everything. And the inevitable of that coming to an end was coming. And it really triggered something in me. After I graduated, I did end up going back home, like literally back into my parents' home after 4 years of being independent. And that just felt so wrong. What a major discomfort to go back to your childhood life after being in a independent environment where you learn how to take care of yourself and start preparing for an adult life. That transition just triggered me. I did not know what to do, and I was lost. I started to have these bad thoughts. I think I started thinking about like dark things like suicide or, things really black. I needed help, but I didn't know how to ask for it. I didn't know what was exactly wrong with me. I didn't know how to articulate. So when I went back home, I didn't realize how bad it was. In fact, my mother was contacting my close friends, like family friends, and they had a daughter that had similar things. And apparently, I was just sitting like zoned out in front of a television, and I wasn't really just functioning at all. My journey with mental health was at the beginning of my journey of becoming an adult. Now, as someone that is very independent, I did not want help from my friends, my parents, no one. I insisted on trying to do it by myself and compete with myself and my sister, who is 3.5 years older. But when you're a child and you're 4 and your sister's 7, 7.5, it's a big age gap. I want to be the best person I can be. But when this mental illness crushed my world, I had to really start over on how to approach life and be able to accept the fact that I needed medication, which I did not want. I found it as a weakness. And I wasn't a big believer in therapy, also. Like, what is therapy? I felt so weak. And also, it was probably a very lonely time as well, because the transition from university to real world is a major chapter change in your life. And I have watched some videos lately from experts talking about that transition from childhood to adulthood is one of the most difficult, especially when it comes to having friendship, because the infrastructure of friendship when you are a child and at university fosters relationships. You are in a routine, you are around people your age and similar interests. And once you leave that structure, there is absolutely nothing for you to find those close friends. So that whole transition from school to adult life, friends and having relationships, that just made my brain implode and I wasn't able to navigate through it. Major transitions like moving and going to live in other countries is one of the most stressful things that I can possibly do. And when I got hospitalized at one point, I would take myself off the meds. There was a point where I felt a new normal. I felt like after a lot of work on myself and being on my meds and working on my spiritual growth, which means to find my true self, I was able to find my anxiety neutral, and I was able to function and find work and develop friendships and, live, I guess, a normal life of some sort. And then my brain was like, well, you're doing so well. Why don't you go off your meds? And then I was in New York City and I finished up my master's and I'm off my meds in another transition. And I'm like walking around aimlessly around the city. Now, I didn't realize the time I was doing this and how long I was doing this. But there was a day where I was walking home and my father was standing in front of my apartment. And I asked him, what are you doing here? And he basically said something, you haven't contacted us in weeks or something like that, or we've been trying to reach you and we haven't been able to speak to you and we're worried. And I think, broke down at the time and I just said, I need help again. And I went back home, back to Long Island, back to my parents' house, gave up my New York City life dream of being a artist living in the city. I felt so isolated there. The cost of living and the dynamic of the city was too much for me, and I could not handle it. But of course, my stubbornness and my determination, I thought I can do it, but I really couldn't. And I had to end up going back to Long Island and start over my mental health again. This journey with mental health has been really a discomfort for me, but I've learned how to be able to navigate my expat journey and travel utilizing tools that I've learned through philosophies, through therapies, through experiences, and offering me a way to navigate myself in this global world. My anxiety will never go away. I do take my medication, though I don't do it exactly the way I'm supposed to, which I can get into another time. But anxiety and depression, there's no cure. You can regulate it. And again, everyone has different types of anxiety and everyone has different kinds of depression. And I'm not here to tell people how they should deal with their mental health. I'm just sharing what I need to do and what has helped me navigate this world with a severe anxiety triggered depression. If I lose a good friend or if I've been in a relationship and I was in love and that ended, the amount of depression that I can go to is really so low and so crippling that I've thought about ending it so many times. It's a disease that wants to kill you. People don't want to hear about it. We don't want to burden people with it. So we keep it to ourselves a lot. When I finally had the courage to leave America, it took me 10 years from the time I traveled to Costa Rica to the time that I finally got out of America. The fear and the discomfort of it was still there, but courage is doing things despite the fear. And at this point, I really truly had to move forward and find the courage, have the faith in the journey to go. Because when I went to Costa Rica, it was truly like a spiritual awakening. And that was around 23 years old. I mentioned it was 1996. And to give you reference to some news around that time, in 1996 in America, there was the O.J. Simpson murder trials going on. And it was really the first time I was aware of the racial tensions in America. I remember when I was at Ohio State, there was the Rodney King story, which was also related to, I believe, a police shooting to an African American. So there was rioting on campus and so on. And that was the first time I really realized about racial tensions in America. And the year after was Princess Diana's death when she was killed in a car accident chase with paparazzi. So we're talking way, way back when I went to Costa Rica to travel and then taking 10 years to figure out how to get abroad and dealing with mental health challenges and having to be on medication. It was an interesting time for me to say goodbye to the status quo, the norm, the familiar, the anxiety neutral, because I really didn't have anxiety neutral. I knew I had to live in a nomadic way. I knew it. And I had such distress and discomfort from trying to live this normal life in America, which was not working for me at all. I was not happy at all living there. I was not my true self. So let me share a little bit about why I didn't feel that America was my home. When it comes to discomfort and distress, I learned so much about what was going on in America during that 10 years of from my 20s into my early 30s. And I realized not only did I no longer belong, but I understood why I didn't belong anymore. my higher education, my education from travels, and seeing my country from an outside in, I realized that the morals and values within my country simply just don't align with what I believe in as far as a quality life and the way of living just didn't match at all. And knowing about certain things besides the inequalities and the American infrastructure crumbling, and our taxes to this day really do not go into the infrastructure of the needs of the people. And it's part of the issues within the parties, because there's one party that really wants all the money for themselves, which is the current administration. And then there's the Democratic Party, which do make an effort, though very flawed, want better things for the people, the working class, the middle class. And I realized that the money I was making and the amount of taxes that I was giving didn't go into the things that I believe in, doesn't go into the education. So the rich and the privileged become more privileged, and the poor and unprivileged become even more. The disparity between the two is just grown. Travel time from an American? They're lucky to have 1 or 2 weeks off, and even luckier if it's paid. Most people in America, about 60%, are part of the working poor. And even if they had time off, they can't afford to. So those are some things that I started becoming more aware about my home country, the country that I was told that when I grow up, I would be living the American dream. And I was educated and I was becoming more skilled, and there weren't opportunities. Well, in the beginning, there was, but still, the cost of living with the salary, I wasn't able to live in a comfortable way either. And I realized, well, it's time to go, because travel, I want a big part of my life, and having a broader way of living and understanding things and learning things. I wasn't going to get any of that when you live in a society that keeps a bubble to the outer world. Only 20 to 30% of Americans have a passport, and yet probably most of them don't even use that to go anywhere, partly because they don't have the time or they don't have the money, or they think everything in America is so great, there's no need to go travel and explore other places. Unfortunately, the mentality of the average American is America's great. Why go anywhere? Well, I disagree. There is more to the world than America. America does have some great things, of course, but it's certainly not the end all be all. The unfortunate thing about America is that the government really doesn't take care of the people like many other developed free countries. For example, Sweden, Switzerland, Norway, Canada. There are many other countries before America on the list of land of the free and countries that really take care of their people. So when it comes to that, I really felt it when I was there. I did not feel a sense of community, as I've mentioned before. We don't look out for each other. And we have the largest homeless population in a developed world in comparison to other countries of the same freedom and the same power. We have an enormous homeless population that is not being addressed. Most kids go hungry in America, believe it or not. 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5. During the pandemic, it got worse. The kids go to school hungry. We have a high percentage of babies dying at childbirth. We have an epidemic of overdose deaths due to opioids and heroin. The world has become quite aware of our gun related deaths and the lack of a government wanting to do really anything about it. They go by prayers to the people that got their kids got killed, but I'm keeping my gun. We have a lot of major issues going on in our country, and we are not willing to address them. We're not making changes. We're not progressing. We are stuck in a very dangerous system right now. And the pandemic really did show that America had the highest amount of deaths. Our communities did not protect the most vulnerable, including elders. I realized that simply the government, the system doesn't give a crap about the people. They simply want the money for themselves and for military power and so on. It just has become very corrupt. But I had to leave. I wanted to live a different life. This part one regarding my discomforts in life with my mental health, with my home country in the US, and how it pushed me out of my comfort zone and got me into living a much more authentic lifestyle that I could never have done in any one country. Now, when it comes to my mental health on this conclusion, one thing that I can tell you is that I can afford my medication and I can afford to take care of myself in the places that I've been living, such as China, here in the Philippines. And I know that I wouldn't have been able to afford that in the United States with the privatization of healthcare. So my mental health, I believe, has improved in ways that I wouldn't have been able to do without this travel lifestyle, because it encourages me to remember that my disease is in my head and that my fears aren't facts. I do know now, especially through my recent travels to Indonesia, that if I have the right gear and I have the right support with people, that I can go straight down into a collapsed cave and witness some of the most magnificent nature that I've ever experienced. And then at the same time, standing in the globe of people right there that this one place brought together, which is worth my anxieties and discomfort, because I'm able to know that there is such beauty and joy through the discomforts of living outside of the familiarity that you have been taught. And it's really important for you to think about as you continue to get older. Have you truly lived? Have you done the things that make you feel discomfort and glad that you tried? Or are you still in a place where you're like, I don't want to get uncomfortable and I don't want to start over? You need to think about that a little more, because is that our journey gets faster and faster as we get older. The time to do things gets shorter and shorter. I encourage you to think about what discomforts would be worth to feel the joy and the satisfaction that you can get by taking steps towards something of the unknown rather than staying in a little bubble doing things that is familiar and safe. There is a balance that can be made with that. But I truly hope that I've given you a little bit of a wake-up call to guide you. It's important to trust the process. And the journey is the beauty of life, not the destination itself. So when we talk about travel in the next episode, I want you to first start thinking about, are you a traveler that allow others to control, to organize, to plan, and then when you get there, you just enjoy the beach? Or maybe you can consider doing the planning and the investigation and the less comfortable route while you travel to really get to know a culture a little deeper, to build a better understanding of another way of life. And I'll leave on that note. So thank you very much for tuning in. See you in the next episode. Bye.